I'm John Hupalo of Invite Education, and welcome to My College Corner. I'm going to start with a confession today, and that is that I was one of those kids that just didn't do well on standardized exams. I really felt like I was tormented from the very first standardized test I can remember, the Iowa Test of Basic Skills. All the best to my friends in Iowa, but I just remember what a tough experience that was, right through the business school GMATs, with a lot of anxiety along the way with the PSAT, the SAT, and others. And I have to tell you, I'm really fortunate that my daughters seem to have inherited their mother's test-taking genes. They did pretty well. But I know the emotional stress that they felt was pretty much the same as mine, despite their better preparation. And the great news is that they did have much better resources and opportunities to help them prepare a little bit better than I did. And preparation certainly is one of the keys to trying to relieve one of the biggest stress factors, which is what is the test going to be like, and where do I need to study, and what do I need to do? And so a few years ago, I met a guy who has dedicated his life to helping students prepare for these standardized tests. He has a master's in psychology. He's a licensed guidance counselor pre-K to 12, and he's the founder of a really great business called Prepped and Polished. It is my pleasure to welcome to My College Corner this afternoon, Alexis Avila. Alexis, welcome to the show.
Thanks. I'm really glad to come on the show, and I appreciate it.
Well, Alexis, I started by saying that I felt this sort of emotional strain. Do kids today have the same sort of anxiety before they're taking their exams? Has any of that changed over time?
Well, I find that students have varying degrees of test anxiety. You have some students who just enjoy taking standardized tests, and that's the minority. And then you have, the lion's share of students walking in who walk into the test with quite a bit of test anxiety.
And I guess that sounds then like it really hasn't changed from an emotional perspective, but have kids changed over the past 5 or 10 years? And I know you've been at this for quite a long time now, but has their approach changed, or do you see more homeschool kids coming to you for help? Just what have the general patterns been over the last 5 or 10 years?
Well, the pressure has gotten to everyone more so today than yesteryear. Colleges, just getting into college is more competitive than ever, and it's just harder to get in. So it's more competitive, and because it's more competitive, everyone's looking over their shoulder, and that creates quite a bit of anxiety. So I find that students are preparing a little earlier than they used to. And like you said in your intro, I mean, it's right on the money. There are a lot more resources available to students, whether you go for a one-on-one tutor or a group class.
Well, I have to tell you, I love the name of your company, Prepped and Polished, because for me, that's the sort of the cause and the effect. If I prep, I'm more likely to be polished. I'm more likely to feel a little bit more confident that I'm going to have what it takes to perform well on these high-stakes tests. How did you start Prepped and Polished? Importantly, how did you find that great name?
Well, I love companies that stand out a little bit with their name, have like fun alliterations. I was tutorific before when I got out of grad school, because I thought it was just a great play on tutor and terrific, and but I didn't think it really had like a serious enough cachet. So one of my mentors and I were brainstorming, and we came up with, because I was doing at the time college application support as well as test prep, Prepped and Polished. Just a kind of a fun, nice little alliteration there, and I love it. Love the name.
Yeah, it's serious, but it also has a little, like you say, a little bit of fun to it. What drove you to get into this whole area of test prep and trying to help students? I said that part of it for me was this idea that I was saddled with loans, and I wanted to try to help families as best I could. And I'm just wondering, for the career that you've had and you've talked about it, I was just wondering how you found your way into this line of work.
Well, a few things. I mean, first I became a guidance counselor. So I'm certified in the state of Massachusetts and Wisconsin, pre-K through 12, because I always felt, that my strength lied with helping students one-on-one, with motivation and self-esteem. So I became a guidance counselor. I wanted to help students, but I didn't when I actually got the job, I didn't like it. So, and I've always been a passionate educator, especially in a one-on-one setting, always tutored, in and out of college. I tutored Michigan college athletes in school. I felt like I just had my gift. I had a gift of connecting, whether you were an unmotivated jock, a loner who didn't fit into high school, girl, boy, it didn't matter. I always felt like I was able to find what motivated that student and genuinely wanted to help that student feel that confidence in himself, herself, so that he could perform his best. It just so happens that I just thought that a natural transition for me would be to jump into, and if I was going to go into some kind of business, it would be a tutoring business where I'm working one-on-one. And I've been doing it for 18 years. I just thought it was a no-brainer. That an educator like myself should be someone who starts a tutoring company. And we do a good job because parents want their son and daughter to not only have a great tutor, but a great role model and mentor to help the student feel more confident academically. Because as we know, it is a high-pressured transition to go from high school to college, and I feel like I'm one piece of that environment. Not the whole piece, not with student loans, but I am one piece of it. If there's any gift I can give a student, it's helping them feel a little bit better so that they can go into the process a little bit more confidently. So.
Yeah, and that's so ultimately important when it comes right down to it, because we talk about statistics, and I always like to say, there's a face behind all those statistics, and you're right at the ground level with a student who might be sitting there because their parents sort of pushed them in that direction, saying, "Oh, you need to do this." But now, tell me a little bit about the services that you provide. How do you work with that student? How much time do they need to really start to begin to well, I guess the real question from the genesis of the whole thing, when do they start to need to prepare for these exams, and what is the process that they go through generally?
Well, Prepped and Polished, we do one-on-one tutoring. We've been doing it for about, I've been doing it for 18 years, and I've branched out and now have about 10 tutors. And we work with students for grades K through 12 with tutoring, one-on-one, and test preparation. We help students get into private schools by taking the SSAT, feeling good about, and strategies and how to, pace themselves from section to section, get into a good private school. And then the ACT and SAT as well. We do a lot of that. And then we go to your home, and we have students come to our office in South Natick, about a mile from Wellesley Center. And then we work with students all over the world online. At the end of each session, we give parents a detailed session report via email, and CC'd on the email is myself, the tutor, and then any teachers, guidance counselors. We like to have as many people in on the progress from session to session so we can kind of have an open dialogue, because we feel like, each student's different and has their own trajectory in terms of, their educational game plan. And I think that it would be doing a disservice if you didn't have everybody in the loop, especially the parents who are paying for it. So if a student is struggling in a certain area, we can all kind of just brainstorm and say, maybe we should just go take this plan in a different direction. And I think that's the success of our tutoring. It doesn't make necessarily the most money because you're doing one-on-one as opposed to just throwing 30 kids in a class, but I feel like it is the most effective way to instill confidence in a student and get them to maximize his learning potential. And then in terms of your question about how little or how much test prep most students need, I find that most students need to prep at least 3 to 6 months before a test day. to maximize scoring potential. And typically we do about 24 hours of preparation. Some families will do less, like 12 hours. Some families do 36 hours. But on average, it's about a 24-hour program where they come in once a week for a couple hours to have a nice, productive session. Because now if you wait until the last minute, such as 4 weeks before the exam, you're starting to reach what I call procrastination zone. And for a student with test anxiety, procrastination is your enemy.
Right. Yeah, no question about that. And one of the issues I think that parents always try to determine with their kids is if I'm going to plunk down a few coins to have this kind of prep service. The immediate question is, well, why should I pay for it if I can get it online for free, or if I can go to Khan Academy or any of these others that are claiming that they have the test prep? And what I'm hearing you say is that there are sort of two parts of this. The first part is the mechanics of what they need to do on the exam, which maybe they can get online or someplace else, but the importance is this one-on-one. Is that really the value proposition for the parents?
Yeah, the value proposition is to have an experienced, upbeat mentor, tutor, educator to sit side by side with that student to hold him or her accountable, go over questions that he gets incorrectly in real time, and pushes him and encourages him to do homework on his own. Because as you know, on test day, you don't have a tutor holding your hand or sitting beside you doing the problems with you. So that's why, again, it's not the most, it doesn't put a lot of money in my pocket. But in many ways, I don't suggest tons and tons of tutoring for that very point that I feel that the students need to learn independence. And sure, the tutoring is very productive. We'll meet for 2 hours once a week, but then you have 6 days in between to really, utilize those strategies, take some practice test sections on your own and time yourself with a stopwatch. Then you come to the next session with questions, armed with questions. But that's the value proposition. It's to have a tutor who's really going to level with the student, hold them accountable, and not butt heads with the student, because that's what the parents are for.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And this idea that you're their coach, you're on their team, you want them to be successful. Once you develop that relationship with that student, in some ways you become a foil with the parents because you can be a little bit of the go-between. But at the end of the day, and I tell parents this all the time, when you're talking about a college, your child, your son or daughter is the one that has to attend that school, just like your son and daughter has to sit in that particular testing center and take that exam. It's on them. And it sounds to me like you empower them to feel as good as they can about that situation.
Yeah, definitely. It's basically instilling confidence and getting as prepared as possible, but also not necessarily instilling this fear that you have to, you can make mistakes in tutoring sessions. It's okay to make mistakes. Just knowing that you prepared well, that's half the battle to doing well. So that's what we kind of work on.
Well, you talk about making mistakes, and I think one of the mistakes that some parents and students make is not understanding that they have a choice of tests between the ACT and the SAT. And I know particularly my daughter is dyslexic, and I know kids like her who have maybe other learning disabilities or may have preference for one test or another, that becomes a big deal for them. But it's also a choice now because the ACT has done such a great job of being accepted at more and more schools. What's your view of when parents and students, first, do they know they have the choice, or a real choice, and second, how do they look at each one of those exams to know which is best for them?
Well, the first thing that we try, make sure that the student and the parents agree on is which test to take, the ACT or the SAT. So that is the very first question we ask, because they need to know which test to prepare for, since colleges accept either the ACT or the SAT. So what we do is, is before the tutoring begins, we have the student take one of the following, either a full practice test for both SAT and ACT. We'll compare those scores and offer our best recommendation for which test to take, or we have a 1-hour ACT-SAT hybrid test, which gives you a decent indication for which is your better test. Right now, both the SAT and ACT are about a 50-50 split in terms of which test students are taking today. But back in the day, in the 80s or whatever, 70s, 80s, 90s, the SAT was not about, say, closer to a 90% of the market share in the New England area. So that has changed quite a bit. So now you have more choices. You can choose an ACT if your Achilles heel is a testing situation like an SAT, which is very a little bit more of an IQ test. Lots of tricks and puzzles, and sometimes you either have it or you don't. ACT is a little bit more of a straightforward question and answer. There's definitely problems on the ACT you wouldn't find on the SAT. So there's pros and cons to both, and we can save that for another podcast. But now students have more choices for sure.
Yeah, and another one of those choices that they have are the optional essays. What's your advice to students about whether or not it makes sense to take those to actually fill out those essay questions?
Well, my advice for optional essays has been the same for years. I find that the most competitive schools with competitive applicants those students will submit their essay. We'll do the essay.
Right.
It's not an option. It's not an option for them. Now, so if you want to stay competitive, it's best that you go for the essay, the optional essay, to showcase your writing skills. However, if your writing is really weak, then you don't take it. You don't do the optional essay. Or if you're applying out of the top 40 school range on U.S. News and World Report, and you're writing subpar, then you probably don't need to do the essay.
I see. That's just great advice. It depends on what school you want to go to, what your strengths are, but this idea that, for most kids who may be coming to you for tutoring and test prep, they may want to be highly competitive at the most prestigious universities, so it sounds like doing those essays would make out the best for them. Let me just ask you this, and we're starting to already run down on time, Alexis. It's funny how the time passes so quickly, but let me just ask you this. It's 3 days before the exam or the night before the exam. What's your best advice to students at that point, and maybe to parents as well, how they can help their student?
Well, Friday, the day before the exam, I recommend packing all your stuff that you'll need the next day. Admission ticket, photo ID. They're really cracking down on identification these days. A calculator with fresh batteries. On Friday, also know how to get to the testing sites. You might want to pass by the testing site. I've had students who actually just get lost and then they're late for their test. And then I also tell students, real specific tips, like if you're going to go to a movie on Friday, the day before your SAT, do not go to a 7 o'clock, because what happens is you get home at 10:30. And then I also tell students not to cram. You've done a lot of preparation to date, and there's long-term memory stuff and there's short-term memory. And at this point, everything that you've been preparing for is already in your long-term memory. There's no point in just kind of getting, oversaturating your brain, and you won't be sharp the next day. And then just get rest. And then on Saturday, you wake up early, Saturday morning of the test day. And now that you've packed the night before, you're not procrastinating and looking for your stuff to take to the test, which could contribute to more anxiety. This is all about kind of reducing anxiety. I tell students to eat a good breakfast full of protein and carbs, so no fried donuts, because what's going to happen is on a 4 or 5 section 4-hour test, you're going to crash big time after section 2. All right, and you need to do your best at the last section. It's like running a marathon. It's not running a sprint. So, you want to save your best for last, and then also I tell students to do a couple early morning, Saturday morning easy math problems just to kind of wake up the brain. And then if you're going to do a test break snack, dark chocolate's a good way to go because it's a really good thing to have if you're in a slump because it gives you a burst of energy without crashing.
Oh, that's some great advice, particularly a couple of math problems beforehand to get everything going. You can do some jumping jacks to get your blood flowing, but a couple mental exercises as well sounds like a great idea. And one other thing before we go, Alexis, is that I just love your website. If you wouldn't mind, just talk a little bit about Prepped and Polished, your podcast, some of the free resources that are online for folks to go and take a look at. You have a wealth of services. Just tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've started blogging in 2002. We have over 500,000 views, 200 plus videos. Podcasting I started about 3 years ago, over 160 episodes. We do a weekly show, and it's a What's Hot podcast, K through 12 on iTunes, where we do tutoring lessons, and we interview influencers in the world of education, like yourself who came on the show. Invite Education, and other guests such as Chris Herron, who was an ex-Boston Celtic who fell into drugs and now inspires students with his overcoming his addiction. And Frank Bruni, who wrote a really good book, New York Times bestselling book on where you end up going to college is not who you'll become. And I mean, I just love it. It's podcasting and blogging is just a good way to give back to people who might not be able to afford private tutoring, and it also helps people obviously learn about my business. So it's a lot of fun.
Well, Alexis, I very much appreciated being on your podcast. It was a lot of fun to do that, and I really do particularly appreciate you reciprocating and coming and talking to my College Corner listeners today. Hope that we can do this again. I think we're sort of running through our time, but do you have maybe just on the way out your last piece of sort of best advice for families who are just about to enter this with their junior or maybe even senior in high school? What's the last best piece of advice you can offer?
Best piece of advice is college is expensive. I believe Northeastern is about $60,000 to $70,000 per year. So my advice is start saving right away when your child's young. 529B plan, get that started. Use Invite Education's program for college planning management. And secondly, I recommend getting your college essays written and start visiting colleges the summer before senior year. Before your senior year gets really busy, you don't want to do college essays while your parents and family members are passing the turkey during Thanksgiving.
Well, there's some great advice. Alexis, thank you again. I really do appreciate your time today. You're a great guest on My College Corner. Hopefully we can do this again very soon.
I hope so. Anytime you need me, I'll be here.
Well, thanks so much, Bill. That was Alexis Avila, the founder and chairman of Prepped and Polished. You can follow Prepped and Polished on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, other prominent social media platforms. There's no question that standardized tests are not only critical, but they're often one of the very first stress points in the college admissions process. And Alexis gave us some really good advice today about how to start, where to begin, why, if you can afford it, why it would be helpful to get a coach on your kid's team early on to help with this whole process. We know every student's different, so is every solution, but having some focus on test prep is an excellent way to start the college admissions process. I want to thank you all for taking some time out of your day to spend in My College Corner. Please send ideas for the show, your questions, your comments to podcast@inviteeducation.com. And until next time, remember, saving $1 today is better than borrowing one tomorrow.